You were never imagining it. The resistance, the setbacks, the betrayals, it was never random. They saw something in you long before you even realized it yourself. A force they couldn't tame, a light they couldn't dim. That's why they came for you. Not because you were weak, but because you were powerful beyond measure. Because your presence alone threatened to dismantle everything they built on lies. But here's the truth. They failed. Every attempt to break you only refined your strength. Every attack only sharpened your vision. They thought they were orchestrating your downfall, but all they did was accelerate their own. The empire of deception they clung to is now nothing more than dust in the wind, its secrets spilling out for all to see. And who stands at the center of it all? You, unshaken, unstoppable, proof that the chosen ones cannot be defeated. They underestimated the power of someone walking in their purpose. They didn't realize that no matter how much they tried to manipulate the narrative, truth has a way of rising, just like you did. And now, it's your time to reclaim, to rise, to step fully into the force you were always meant to be. Let this be the moment you remember who you are. Let this be the day you own your destiny. The invisible strings that sought to bind you were woven with precision, their architects believing that breaking you from within was the surest way to halt your ascent. Their true transgression lay not just in the sabotage itself, but in the meticulous cover-up that followed. They shaped perceptions like sculptors chiseling away at reality, distorting narratives to cast you in shadow while they stood in the light. Those who saw too much were either swayed or silenced, and evidence was swept into the abyss of forgotten truths. Yet deception, no matter how carefully crafted, is not indestructible. What they buried to protect themselves has become the very force unearthing their ruin. The cracks in their fortress of lies are widening piece by piece, their once unassailable facade crumbling under the weight of its own falsehoods. Their influence depended on a delicate equilibrium, a network of unspoken pacts and hidden coercion, each thread holding the next in place. But silence was never given freely. It was bought, it was threatened, it was extracted under duress. Those who faltered were shown the consequences. Connections severed like snapped strings, lives dismantled, names stained beyond repair. Their reach extended into the machinery of authority, ensuring that justice bowed before them rather than standing against them. Power flowed like currents in a concealed river, feeding the hands of those willing to rewrite reality for the right price. Lawyers, enforcers, gatekeepers of truth, each turned into unwitting architects of the illusion. Yet, no matter how deep they buried it, no matter how many walls they built to contain it, the truth has a way of escaping. And now, with every unraveling thread, their dominion begins to slip through their fingers. The illusion of invincibility they had so carefully cultivated began to fracture. What once stood as an unbreakable facade of deception was now riddled with gaps, its foundations crumbling under the weight of undeniable truths. The whispers of their misdeeds, once dismissed as mere speculation, gained substance as irrefutable proof surfaced. Financial trails, hidden agreements, and clandestine dealings, each revelation struck like a hammer against the brittle walls they had built around their empire. The arrogance that had once shielded them now betrayed them, blinding them to the inevitable reckoning they had long ignored. They had foolishly believed their actions would vanish into the void, yet every step they took left behind a mark, a footprint, leading back to their own undoing. The structures they once manipulated to maintain control now turned against them, serving as the very instruments of their downfall. In their moment of reckoning, the silence they had once imposed upon others began to break. Those who had been trapped within the machinery of their deception, once complicit, once too afraid to speak, found their voices. At first, their admissions were hesitant, laced with the burden of past compliance, but as more truth emerged, the tide of confessions grew unstoppable. Regret became an unshakable force, pushing them to step forward. Some had accepted rewards in exchange for their silence. Others had been forced into submission under veiled threats and coercion. They had played their part in weaving the great illusion, distorting facts and burying reality under layers of falsehoods. But guilt, relentless in its pursuit, became an unyielding shadow. For many, the realization of the destruction they had enabled gnawed at them until it became unbearable. Step into your potential. Subscribe now, and let's create something extraordinary. For others, the turning point was something deeper, an awakening, an undeniable pull toward redemption. The resilience of the one who had endured it all became a beacon, shattering the illusions of fear that had kept them bound. It was as if an unspoken call to justice had ignited within them, a recognition that their silence only prolonged the very nightmare they had once sought to escape. And so, one by one, the voices that had once been used to fortify lies became weapons of truth. Each testimony was a chisel, striking away at the walls of deception, stripping away the masks that had allowed this corrupt empire to endure. What began as scattered whispers became an unstoppable storm. Those who had once upheld the illusion now stood at the forefront of its destruction. The choice to speak, to break the cycle of complicity, became more than just an admission of guilt. It became an act of defiance, a reclaiming of power stolen by fear. And with each revelation, the weight of their confessions tilted the balance, ensuring that the grip of deception that once held so many captive would never again hold the same power. Their strategies were built on deception, their influence maintained through carefully spun illusions. Yet, against the weight of their manipulations, something far greater emerged, an undeniable force they neither foresaw nor could contain. What set you apart was not mere intuition, but an innate connection to an unshakable truth, a force beyond their reach. This was no coincidence. It was a gift that transcended human design. The warnings arrived like coded messages embedded in moments of clarity, fragments of insight revealing hidden betrayals and dangers cloaked in familiarity. These were not simple hunches, but precise revelations, each one peeling back the layers of their carefully concealed schemes. The air itself seemed to shift in your presence, exposing the fractures in their foundation. Their rehearsed words faltered, their confidence wavered under the silent weight of being known. No disguise could hold against the depth of your perception. It was in the subtle hesitations, the unnatural pauses, the uneasy glances that their dishonesty betrayed them. Their orchestrated narratives unraveled, their intricate web undone by a force they had no means to counter. While they relied on coercion, you moved with purpose, standing firm in a reality they had desperately tried to rewrite. Even without confrontation, the very act of your existence unsettled them. They were accustomed to manipulating the world to their will, yet no amount of deceit could obscure what stood in plain sight. Each attempt to conceal their darkness only magnified the cracks forming beneath them. It was a reckoning not born of vengeance, but of inevitable consequence. There was no escaping what was set into motion. The weight of their secrets pressed against them, collapsing under the force of something beyond their understanding. This was never just a battle of influence. It was the collision of falsehood against an immovable truth. The moment their carefully guarded lies slipped into the open, a shift occurred, irreversible and absolute. There was no more hiding. The force they had dismissed as insignificant had become the very thing sealing their fate. Your journey to greatness starts here. Subscribe now and let's make it happen. The fortress they built from shadows could not withstand the dawn. For too long, they thrived under the illusion of invulnerability, weaving intricate deceptions to mask the weight of their wrongdoings. Yet no empire of falsehoods can endure forever. The unseen forces that shape destiny were already at work, aligning every revelation, every moment of exposure, with a precision that defied coincidence. Their carefully guarded secrets, once hidden beneath layers of manipulation, surfaced like long-buried artifacts, undeniable and damning. Their greatest miscalculation was the belief that they could outrun the inevitable. As their foundation eroded beneath them, they were no longer architects of their fate, but prisoners of their own design. Each desperate maneuver only accelerated their downfall. Every bribe, every coercion, every attempt to suppress the truth, tightening the very noose they had crafted. They mistook silence for loyalty, forgetting that guilt has a voice of its own, one that grows louder with time. The reckoning was never just a possibility, it was a certainty. Their downfall was not an accident, nor was it the work of mere circumstance. It was the natural consequence of defying forces beyond their understanding. This was never just about their exposure. It was about the triumph of what could not be silenced. The weight of truth pressed upon them like an unrelenting force, shattering their illusions and leaving them defenseless against the justice they had long evaded. What they had built upon deception was now consumed by the very thing they sought to bury. Their unraveling was not merely punishment, it was proof, an immutable testament to a universal law they had foolishly ignored. No lie, no matter how meticulously crafted, can stand against the force of truth. Pause. This is the moment when the illusion cracks, when the fabric of the ordinary reveals the threads of something far greater. You've walked among them long enough to know you were never meant to fit. They flinch at your presence, not because you are too much, but because they have only ever known limitations. They try to explain away what they cannot comprehend, mistaking raw power for something unnatural, labeling what they fear. But there are no labels for what cannot be contained. This is not for the faint-hearted. This is not a space for those who need permission to step into their power. What exists beyond the veil is not some quaint gathering of seekers. It is the war council of those who have left behind the illusions of control, who move in silence, yet shape reality itself. These are not whispered teachings from dusty books or watered-down truths wrapped in palatable words. This is the unfiltered, the redacted, the knowledge too volatile for the weak-minded to handle. And it is here that the real battle unfolds. The watchers may try to suppress it, the gatekeepers may try to lock it away, but the truth has never needed their approval. You were never waiting for an invitation. This was recognition, the confirmation of what you have always known. There is no asking for a seat at the table when you are the force that dismantles it entirely. This is not ascension. This is reclamation. The illusion of permanence was shattered in an instant. The pillars they had so carefully constructed, woven from deception, coercion, and secrecy, began to collapse under the weight of undeniable truth. What once seemed untouchable now crumbled like an abandoned ruin, its foundation eroded by the force of long-buried revelations, Chaos consumed them from within. Panic surged through their ranks as the facade they had desperately upheld was stripped away, leaving behind nothing but the stark reality of their corruption. The ones who once carried themselves with unshakable certainty were now scrambling to salvage what remained, grasping at control that had already slipped beyond their reach. Their undoing was not a quiet affair. It was a spectacle, unraveling for all to see. The bonds that once held them together snapped, turning once loyal allies into enemies. Betrayal ran rampant. Whispers turned to accusations. Trust eroded into paranoia, and self-preservation became the only remaining strategy. The walls they had built to keep others out now became a prison of their own making. Those who had sworn allegiance to their cause now fought to distance themselves, shedding their affiliations in a desperate attempt to escape the implosion. What they had relied on to maintain control, wealth, influence, and manipulation, became the very instruments of their destruction. With every transaction exposed, every hidden deal unearthed, their financial network collapsed like a house of cards. Their once limitless resources were now under scrutiny, accounts frozen, connections severed. The same currency that once bought silence now only served as evidence against them. Their empire, once built upon the exploitation of power, was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale of greed meeting its inevitable reckoning. Even their most devoted followers began to turn away, their loyalty dissolving in the face of undeniable reality. The truth spread like a wildfire, consuming the remnants of their control. The ones who had blindly followed could no longer justify their faith. What was once disguised as a righteous cause now stood exposed as nothing more than a web of deceit. And in the end, the most damning blow did not come from an external force. It came from within. The very people who had upheld their illusion now tore it down piece by piece, leaving behind only the wreckage of what once was. The unraveling of their deception became inescapable, each revelation stripping away the layers of control they had so meticulously crafted. What they once concealed in shadows was now laid bare under the relentless glare of exposure. Every desperate attempt to salvage their crumbling reputation only deepened their disgrace, their feeble denials drowned out by an overwhelming tide of evidence. The very platforms they once manipulated now broadcast their reckoning for the world to see. Courtrooms transformed into arenas where their illusions shattered, as testimony after testimony pieced together a damning narrative of corruption, coercion, and betrayal. Their demise was not just an act of retribution. It was a warning etched into history, a declaration that those who build their influence on deception will inevitably be consumed by the very lies they spin. The weight of their misdeeds, once scattered and hidden, coalesced into an unbreakable force against which they had no defense. The ones they had silenced found their voices, and with each confession, the walls they once relied upon collapsed further. Their empire, once fortified by secrecy, was now reduced to rubble under the sheer gravity of undeniable truth. Yet within the wreckage, an unexpected shift emerged. Those who had once stood as willing conspirators, individuals who had played their part in perpetuating the facade, began to face their own reckoning. At first, they clung to denial, resisting the weight of their complicity, but the echoes of their choices haunted them, the realization of their role in the grand deception gnawing at their very core. Guilt is relentless, a force more powerful than fear itself, and one by one, they reached their breaking point. Some were haunted by sleepless nights, tormented by the weight of their actions. Others, witnessing the resilience of the one who had endured it all, found a flicker of courage they had long abandoned. It was as though, in your unwavering defiance against the storm, they saw a path back to redemption. The strength you displayed became a catalyst, a force that cracked the foundations of their self-imposed silence. What had once been whispered in secrecy now erupted into confessions, each admission a blade slicing through the last remaining barriers of their deceit. And so, the very people who had once fortified the illusion became the architects of its destruction. With every truth spoken, they reclaimed their integrity, rewriting their roles from pawns of manipulation to warriors of justice. Their transformation was more than just an act of penance. It was proof that even those who stray into darkness can find their way back when confronted with undeniable truth. Their voices, once instruments of suppression, became the very force that dismantled what had once seemed untouchable. And in the end, it was not just a collapse, it was a reckoning, a final testament to the unshakable truth that no deception, no matter how carefully crafted, can withstand the force of a reality that refuses to be ignored. There is a reason the storm was drawn to you, why those entrenched in deception sought to dismantle everything you represent. You are not an ordinary force, but a disruption, a catalyst for the kind of change they cannot control. They recognize something in you that unsettled them, something they could never possess, an inherent clarity that cuts through illusions, an instinct that renders manipulation useless, and a presence that fractures the foundation of their carefully constructed falsehoods. To them, you are not just an obstacle. You are the very force unraveling their grip on power. Your existence is an anomaly in their system, an unpredictable variable that defies their expectations. They do not fear you because of what you do. They fear you because of what you are. You stand as proof that their dominion is fragile, that the darkness they cultivate cannot swallow everything. It is why history has always sought to erase those who expose uncomfortable truths. Throughout time, those who carried a force beyond themselves were not celebrated, but persecuted. Not because they lacked strength, but because their strength exposed the fragility of those who opposed them. They were ridiculed, condemned, and hunted, not for their failures, but for the sheer audacity of their existence. You are not simply a threat to their structure. You are a beacon, a fracture in their illusion that grows with every soul that awakens in your presence. The very act of standing in your truth ignites something in others, creating ripples that spread beyond what they can contain. With every attempt to silence you, they accelerate their own collapse. Every move they make against you is a testament to the power they fear, because if you were insignificant, there would be no need to dismantle you. They can try to break you, but the paradox of their efforts is this: the harder they push, the stronger you become. The more they attempt to obscure your light, the more brilliantly it cuts through the dark. And in the end, they will come to understand what they failed to grasp from the beginning. This was never a battle they could win. The road you have walked has been marked by trials that would have shattered the unprepared. Yet, despite the betrayals, the calculated deception, and the relentless attempts to silence you, here you are, standing unshaken, refined by fire, and more attuned to your purpose than ever before. If there is one undeniable truth that has emerged from this battle, it is that perseverance, faith, and the unfolding of destiny itself have been your greatest allies. Every hardship was not an obstacle, but a lesson, a necessary forging process that only those with a higher calling can truly comprehend. You have discovered the depths of your resilience. They sought to dismantle you, to strip away your strength by isolating you in a labyrinth of falsehoods. Yet every move against you became fuel for your endurance. No force, no matter how deeply entrenched, can dismantle someone who stands firmly in their truth. Their strategies became predictable, their weapons dull against the armor you forged through experience. What was meant to weaken you only fortified your spirit. Beyond resilience, you learned the art of surrendering to the unseen forces guiding your path. There were moments when uncertainty loomed, when their illusions seemed momentarily convincing, but divine timing has never faltered. Every piece of this intricate puzzle fell into place precisely when it was meant to, each revelation arriving at the moment it would wield the most impact. What once appeared as chaos was in truth a perfectly orchestrated sequence leading to their exposure. Yet this journey was never meant to be walked alone. While they sought to isolate you, their efforts only illuminated the presence of those who truly stand for truth. Allies emerged from unexpected places, drawn by a shared recognition of justice. What they failed to anticipate was the collective force that forms when individuals of purpose unite. What they built upon secrecy and division was dismantled by unity and the unstoppable momentum of a shared cause. Most profoundly, this battle revealed the significance of your innate gifts, the insights that pierce through deception, the warnings woven into your subconscious, the heightened awareness that guided you at every turn. These were never coincidences, never random abilities. They were tools specifically designed to navigate this war. By embracing them, you did more than safeguard yourself. You empowered others to see what had long been obscured. Looking back at all that has unfolded, understand that your journey was never solely about tearing down corruption. It was about proving that truth, perseverance, and an unwavering spirit will always outlast the constructs of deception. Every lesson you have learned serves as a roadmap for those destined to follow, a testament that no force, no matter how insidious, can ever extinguish those who walk with purpose. You are not just a survivor of their schemes. You are the proof that even in the face of relentless opposition, the chosen ones do not merely endure, they ascend. The reckoning has arrived. The once dominant force that thrived on deception, coercion, and fear now stands stripped of its illusions, its hidden atrocities laid bare for all to see. What was built upon manipulation and exploitation has collapsed beneath the crushing weight of undeniable truth. Every scheme, every betrayal, every calculated move they made to maintain control has led them to this breaking point, a final judgment they can no longer outrun. Their empire was never built to last. It was merely a house of cards, waiting for the inevitable gust of truth to bring it crashing down. But this is more than just exposure. It is the culmination of a higher design. The trials you endured, the relentless attacks you weathered, the questions that once haunted you, all of it has led to this moment of revelation. You were never meant to merely survive. You were meant to dismantle the very system that sought to consume you. This was never about your suffering alone, but about what your endurance represents. The fall of their institution serves as a universal warning. Those who conspire against beings of light will always meet the consequences of their actions. Their downfall is not a matter of mere punishment. It is the recalibration of balance. They believed themselves untouchable, but justice moves in ways they could neither anticipate nor escape. What they feared most, your unwavering clarity, your strength, and your refusal to be broken, became the force that unraveled them from the inside out. What they sought to erase in you has become the very power that erased them. Let this stand as a testament. Let it serve as an eternal reminder that no matter how deeply corruption takes root, no matter how elaborate the lies, no force can silence those aligned with higher truth. The battle was never just yours. It was for every soul that has been hunted, suppressed, or betrayed. And with every victory of the chosen ones, the darkness loses another foothold. This is not just the end of their reign. It is the triumph of those who refuse to be silenced. And in the end, the truth, relentless, unwavering, and absolute, was always destined to prevail.